You didn't think I'd finish, did you? Mark Rogers TV rating the conferences, and we've been so busy with National Signing Day and recruiting and rating positions that, yeah, we're going to finish our labor of love. This is what we do each and every off season. We take the results from the previous season of the Power 5 conference games against one another, and we put them in a vacuum. We grind them out. We throw them through the shredder, and this is what we get. We are able to rate the conferences based on the performance on the field against one another. So hopefully you checked out the introductory video. So do that to understand the process here in the formula. I'll try to give you a snapshot of it as we take you through the Pac-12. So we've knocked out the Big 12 and the Big 10. We now come to the Pac-12 that had an excellent season 2 years ago in 2014 at 13-6 on the surface. We broke down the wins and the losses and gave them context, and this is what it's all about. And we determined that for that season, the Pac-12 had played the best football against the other four conferences. This isn't necessarily saying for sure that the winner of this competition, of this formula, is the best conference, but it definitely played the best against the four other conferences. So this is what happened with the Pac-12 in 2016. 10-9, 10 wins, 9 losses against the other Power 5 leagues. So let's run them down real quick. Washington beat Rutgers, Cal over Texas, Stanford over Kansas State, Stanford beat Notre Dame and North Carolina as well. UCLA over BYU, Arizona State over Texas Tech. Utah beat BYU and Indiana. USC defeated Penn State in the Rose Bowl, of course. The losses for the Pac-12. Washington lost to Alabama. Washington State lost to Minnesota. Oregon lost to Nebraska. Oregon State lost to Minnesota. USC lost to Alabama. UCLA lost to Texas A&M. Arizona lost to BYU. Colorado to Michigan and Oklahoma State. Okay, now let's put it into context. Okay, we awarded 20 points for every win, subtracted 20 points for every loss. So if a Pac-12 team won a game, they got 20 points. If they lost a game, they lost 20 points. So 200 points with the 10 wins, negative 180 points with the losses. But let's get to where it really breaks down. You got to take the seedings into context. Obviously, if the best team in the Pac-12 defeats the worst team in the Big 10, that should count. But how much should it count for? And that is actually what happened last year with Washington defeating the Rutgers, the 14 seed in the Big 10. So if Washington defeats Penn State or Ohio State, that should count for a whole lot more than if they defeat Rutgers. So we account for the seeding difference. So the 20-point win for the Pac-12 in this case is reduced greatly because Washington is the 1 seed and Rutgers the 14 seed in the Big 10. So it's a 13 seed difference. Subtract that from the 20-point win, and it's a 7-point win for the Pac-12. It's a 7-point loss for the Big 10. Two really big wins for the Pac-12 in terms of the seeding comparison would be UCLA as the 11 seed defeating BYU, the 5 seed, and take into consideration that with the major independents, we had to slot them based on record. And what I did was I slotted them in each Power 5 conference, averaged the seeding, and for BYU, that was a 5 seed. Also, USC is the 3 seed in the Pac-12 defeated the 1 seed Penn State in the Rose Bowl. Now, do I consider USC to be the 3rd best team in the Pac-12 at the conclusion of 2016? No, but the seedings dictate it. This is not my opinion. This is the seedings based on the standings. Washington won the Pac-12. Colorado finished 2nd as they won the division, and then USC would be number 3. So I based it on conference record and then head-to-head and then overall record in terms of the conference seedings. The losses for the Pac-12, the really bad one, and it's not a horrible loss, but the worst seeded loss would be Washington State as the 4 seed in the Pac-12, losing to the 7 seed out of the Big 10, Minnesota, in the Holiday Bowl. Otherwise, not any bad losses. Yes, you could consider USC getting pasted by Alabama a bad loss, but we're not taking scores into consideration. These are just wins and losses. So every win is the same. Every loss is the same based on score, not necessarily seeding. Okay, this is what we have down here. In the 10 Pac-12 wins over the Power 5 teams, those Pac-12 teams went 84-44. I just put that up there for reference. I don't think that's important. This is the number that's important, that the Pac-12 teams that won those 10 games went 50-41 in conference. So we get an indication of how good those teams were in the conference. They won 55% of their games. They beat 10 teams in the other Power 5 leagues. They went 68-59, but they went 29-33. They won less than 47% of their games in their league. So you would expect teams that win 55% of their games in conference to defeat teams that win 47%, but 10 consecutive games. So that's a strong point for the Pac-12. So the average seed of these 10 teams that won those games is just slightly over 7, a 7 seed in the Pac-12. And trust me, we accounted for the number of teams in each conference, the discrepancy between the 10 in the Big 12, the 12 in the Pac-12, and the 14 in the other 3 leagues. And 8.1 was the average seed that the Pac-12 defeated. So really only an average of a 1 seed difference, and the Pac-12 was able to win all 10 of those games. All right, in the losses, this is pretty impressive for the Pac-12 as well. They went 66-50. Those 9 teams that lost those games went 66-50 overall. They won 56.8% of their games within the Pac-12. They were a solid 46-35, losing those 9 consecutive games against the other leagues. The teams that they played, though, were dominant. They lost to Alabama twice. They lost to a good Minnesota team. They lost to Minnesota twice, actually. They lost to BYU. They lost to Michigan and Oklahoma State. Those teams and others finished at 50-19 in their conferences and won over 72% of their games. So we're talking about an average 4.2 seed that's defeating an average 6.6 seed in the Pac-12. Okay, the quality of win in these 10 wins for the Pac-12 is 19.4. That's a very strong number because consider that we start at 20. So if all the games, all 10 of those wins for the Pac-12 were played against like-seeded teams, the 1 seed played the 1, the 5 played the 5 in another league, then that score would be 20. That score is almost always going to be a little bit lower than 20 at least. And if you've seen the other videos, you see that it's considerably lower, especially in the Big 12, because most likely your higher seeded teams are going to beat their lower seeded teams. That's just the way it works out. Likewise here, you would like this number to be as low as possible. So that's a decent figure for the Pac-12. That's taking the quality of loss into consideration. So we take all the wins and the quality of those wins and we add them all up. Then we take the quality of losses and subtract it from the wins. What we come out is with 35 points for the Pac-12. How does that compare to the other leagues? Well, you got to watch the other videos and we'll wrap it all up when we get done. We'd love to hear from you and what your perspective is on this little formula, and we'll talk about it right here on Mark Rogers TV.